Oh, Canada. What's up, YouTube? I'm Untitled Chapter, host of Monologue Packers podcast. Thank you for being here, and thank you for clicking on this video. As always, we are here to discuss some Packer news. I did not do a video last Friday or Sunday. This is posting on Wednesday. I'm here to break down last week's game against the Baltimore Ravens and this upcoming game against the Oakland Raiders. A lot to talk about. Well, a few things to talk about. I mean, we're in the dog days of training camp right now. So, I mean, there's some news. I think you've heard a lot of the stories that have already percolated from the reservoir of the training camp basin. I'm using big words now. So without further ado, it is time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. All right, so real quick before we get started, I have to say that this is a new fixture to the show, to the podcast, to the channel. This is completely improv. This will hopefully be a one-off. I opened a bottle of I don't want to throw any beer underneath the table. Beer makers might come after me, but I opened up a bottle and the top of it completely shattered, and it was jagged edges of glass. And this is the closest thing that I have to an actual Pilsner glass or anything pint glass, anything comparable to what you'd put beer in. This is kind of fancy. It says ice cold drink glassware. It works exactly for what I need it to, and what I need it to do is keep me in the mood to talk about Packer news, and that starts with a recap of last week's game against Baltimore, which wasn't the greatest showing for the Green Bay Packers. They did end up losing 26-13 on the road, their first road game. And there's a couple headlines that I picked out. I've had a couple of days to kind of dissect some of the footage and some of the news articles and some of my own opinions for that matter. And here are a couple of the headlines that I find interesting from the game. So, of course, you have to start with Rodgers. He was a scratch. He was a last-minute scratch from the game. I remember getting a notification on my phone at about 5 o'clock on Thursday saying Rodgers would sit. So that was obviously a disappointment. That was one of the things I was looking forward to seeing last week. But he has some precautionary back tightness that kept him out of the game. Since then, has come back and returned to practice. He missed out of practice on Tuesday, but he did practice Wednesday. Missed out on practice on Sunday, but he did practice on Monday and Tuesday. And he is going to be a game time decision on Thursday against the Raiders. But if there's anything that we've learned from some of these so-called quotation injuries from Packers camp so far is that they are all precautionary. It was the same thing with Aaron Jones, even Jamal Williams, even Mason Crosby. It kept him out for the first week of training camp. Nothing that I think we need to be concerned about. So there's really no reason to talk about a whole lot more. Backup quarterback competition. So that obviously opened up the door with Rodgers sitting. It opened up the door for Kaiser again to start the game and get some playing time with that first-string offense. And quite frankly, he is not the guy that we want as our backup quarterback. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to dance around this bush anymore and ignore the fact that I think Kaiser can be the backup. He may end up the backup for Aaron Rodgers, but he is not the answer for our backup long-term, or if Rodgers goes down, we just simply don't stand a chance. So Kaiser went 5 for 10. He had 70 yards, 0 interceptions, which is a huge bonus for him because that's usually something that he does. He put up 3 points with that first-team offense or that first-string offense. But yeah, things just really weren't looking all that great. They stalled out. They ended one of their drives. They went for it on fourth down, couldn't convert, and then he was able to get them down there in field goal position and hit a field goal. But really, I mean, nothing wowing me from Kaiser. If I had to pick a backup quarterback, and I'm going to put my mark on this one, if I had to pick my backup quarterback, I would go with Tim Boyle. Now, again, this is a toss-up. It's really, neither of these guys are going to be really starters in the NFL, at least in this stage of their current career. But if I had to have someone behind Aaron Rodgers to maybe fill in for a series, hopefully at the most, if Rodgers goes down, Boyle, he's the guy. He's the guy in my opinion. And yes, he did have a slow start to the game. He missed 7 of his first 8 passes to start out the game against the the Ravens on Thursday night. But he finished 12 of 21, so he got all of his misses out of the way, his faulty passes. He finished with 107 yards, which isn't so bad for the limited time that he was in the game, and he had a 1-yard touchdown. He's the only quarterback, quite frankly, to throw touchdowns in both the first game and the second game. So I don't know. Like I said, we're going to be in trouble regardless if we don't find a true backup quarterback. Maybe a veteran would be nice to kind of bring in, but it's hard. It's a quarterback-driven league. There's a reason why so many of these teams struggle year in, year out to make it to the playoffs and win games, is because they just can't find that guy to be a quarterback for their team. And we've been lucky. We've been lucky with Rodgers, and we're going to ride that Rodgers train toot toot as long as possible. Moving on from there, though, let's talk about the wide receiver battle. It is very strong. I finished my last video talking about how strong our depth was at wide receiver. These are things that I had noticed and was looking forward to, and it's a crapshoot. I have a lot of people asking me outside of this what I think is going to happen in that wide receiving battle, and it's a complete toss-up. So Kumaro had 3 catches, 52 yards. Allen Lazard had 3 catches for 63 yards. And Darius Shepard, my dark horse to make the roster, had a 7-yard touchdown. Not the greatest game for Shepard. He was one of my who to watch in the last game. He had a couple drops, I think a couple missed opportunities, but he did end up getting in the end zone. And he was the only Packers player to find some end zone grass, unless you were on the defense and tried to stop the Ravens from scoring. Rodgers went on to say this past week, so he had a locker room interview on Monday night, I believe, and he went on to say that the wide receiving group is one of the deeper groups that we've had. There are a lot of guys with legitimate shots to make this team, some guys who you didn't maybe think of before camp who have had incredible camps, and I'm talking specifically, and he calls out a player. He's already called out Jake Kumaro in the past, but now here we go, he's calling out someone else. He's specifically talking about Allen Lazard. He's made a bunch of plays, always shows up on special teams, does things the right way in practice, and I think he's put himself in a position to legitimately be playing for all 32 teams. So Rodgers acknowledges the depth that we have at that wide receiver position. He knows that it's going to be really interesting to see what happens come cut day, not this Saturday, but next Saturday, because that's right around the corner. And I think he's going to be happy regardless of what they find. I would love to keep some of these guys on the practice squad. Obviously, if you kick your left leg out, it shakes the entire camera. So I'm just going to move my left leg back. But it'll be really interesting to see how this shakes out. I will give you my roster predictions next Friday, day before the roster cuts actually happen. But yeah, a lot of depth at wide receiver. I'm looking forward to seeing that battle go on. Another bright spot to come from Thursday's night game was the J.K. Scott looking fantastic. So he had a total of 6 punts in Thursday night's game. He averaged 52.8 yards a punt, with an average hang time of a little over 5 seconds. So that looks great. I love what I'm seeing out of that punter. It turns out that when you draft a punter, that good things can come from that. It's not just a wasted pick. Elgton Jenkins also is looking like a starter, and this is something that I preluded to before training camp started, that I think it's going to be really interesting to see if Lane Taylor can hold on to that left guard position, because our offensive line is pretty much set for the most part, except for that left guard. And according to Pro Football Focus, Jenkins has the top pass blocking grade in the NFL with players of at least 40 snaps. So he has yet to allow a single pressure over 45 total pass blocking snaps. And he's played left guard, he's played right guard, he's even filled in at center. So they're moving him all over that offensive line. And if there's one thing that I can say about Elgton Jenkins that I haven't already said, is that if he is not a starter, if Lane Taylor ends up holding out that position and that starting group, that this is a type of player that we can fill in wherever we might need him. And if somebody goes out, like for instance, if Bulaga goes out, we can then shift Billy Turner out to that right tackle position, and then you have Elgton Jenkins that can fill in for him. So there's a lot of opportunity. It's nice to have that one guy that's multi-talented in different positions. LaFleur was quoted saying about Jenkins that I think he'll play in this league for a long time. I love his demeanor and the way he goes about his business. Still a lot of things to clean up and work on, but I think the future is bright for Elgton Jenkins, and I could not agree more. And like I said, what does this happen? What does this mean for Lane Taylor? Well, I know what it doesn't mean. I think I know what a lot of you wish it would mean, because there's a rumor out there that Jadeveon Clowney is on the market. The Houston Texans are looking to trade him. They want an offensive lineman to compensate, and we happen to maybe have an offensive lineman in Lane Taylor, who is a very capable starter. But I don't see that happening. I'd love to see it happen. Don't get me wrong. If we could add Clowney to the defensive rush, that would be just the end. Game over. Number one defense in the league. But I just don't see it happening. The last highlight or mark from last week's game is something that I've talked about a lot, and it's now become a little bit more of a problem, and that is the missed tackles. So if you watch any of the interviews after the game of LaFleur, he had one with Larry McCarron, then he had his obvious press conference afterwards. Larry McCarron interview was probably, a minute and a half, and then his press conference, which is typically 12 minutes, only ran about 4 minutes long. And you can see this was the first time that I've seen LaFleur very upset, or at least very short with his answers. You could see that he had some fire, some anger perhaps in his eyes. He was straight to the point, and he said, as a whole, defensively, it just wasn't good enough. They had over 20 missed tackles against Kansas City, and it looks like early indications are they had another 20 missed tackles against the Ravens. So this is obviously a problem, a concern. And it's something that I'm previewing it now, but something I'm going to be watching as we head into Oakland, if they can improve those tackling skills that they need to have, especially when the regular season comes around. The last thing you want to be doing is missing tackles when you can actually have a offense go back 4 yards, but instead they pick up a couple, and it's just the most frustrating thing to exist outside of long lines at amusement parks. That just came to mind. I hate long lines at amusement parks. So a lot of people after the game on social media, I'm part of a couple Facebook groups, they're pulling the panic alarm as far as their loss on Thursday night. They didn't look good. Let's just call it what it is. They didn't look the greatest. They didn't look sharp. The energy wasn't there. The offense couldn't seem to get going a whole lot. The defense, our first string defense, just really wasn't, all that. I mean, Lamar Jackson had his way. Let's just put it that way. So people pulling the panic alarm. It's preseason. Let's all just calm down a little bit. It will filter its way to a median point. I like how I start a sentence sometimes and I just don't know where I'm going with it. It'll be fine though. It's just the preseason. Don't panic. Turn off the panic alarm. 2 weeks till the regular season. If we start the season 0-4, 0-5, yeah, pull that panic alarm. But for the most part, just let it be. It's a part of the process. It's not about wins or losses in the preseason. It's just about going out there, getting better for the regular season and starting to build upon that championship culture, which is what the Packers need to get back to, because we haven't made the playoffs the last 2 years. So since Thursday night, the Packers have had 3 practices. They finished up their last 2 open practices, public practices on Sunday and Monday. And then yesterday they had their first closed door session. As I mentioned, Rodgers did return back from that back precautionary back tightness that left him out. But one thing that I want to talk about is, and it's obviously making headlines, is does he need to play on Thursday? If he doesn't play on Thursday, LaFleur has already ruled him out for next Thursday against the Chiefs. So this is really, we're a day away. Tomorrow, Thursday, we're a day away from figuring out if Rodgers will play and if this offense can start to get a little bit of momentum heading into the regular season. And my thoughts and my stance on this is yes, Rodgers needs to play. I don't even care if it's just 2 series. He needs to be out on that field, and he needs to start to just get a sense of it, because there's going to be a whole lot of chaos and adrenaline and everything going on Thursday night and the home opener, or excuse me, on the NFL opener against the Bears at Soldier Field. And you just can't let that be the first time that you're just taking it in under center. It's been months, Aaron, since you've played in a competitive NFL game, and a game that matters, mind you. Ever since Arizona, it pretty much didn't matter after that. So he needs to play. He has to get out there. If he doesn't play, I will be very worried about that first. It's hard for me to commit to it because it's Aaron frickin' Rodgers, but I think he's got to get out on the field. Rodgers doesn't seem too concerned. I mean, they ask him, if you don't get out there and play, is this going to be a big problem for you? Are you going to, is it going to affect your performance? Is it going to affect your mindset, your confidence? Rodgers went on to say that, if we, the starters, didn't play, I'd feel great going into week 1. If we did, I wouldn't really be worried too much about the results. So he's saying, he can go out there and make a touchdown drive and great, but it's not going to really influence his perspective or his stance heading into the regular season. To score a touchdown is not going to give me any more confidence than I already have in this scheme. He's confident. He felt this way when we talked about joint practices last week, that he doesn't, what they accomplish on a day-to-day basis, whether it's their walkthroughs in the meetings or just team-on-team, 11-on-11 activities and drills, he feels like he is accomplishing what he needs to accomplish. And Rodgers, like I said, is a veteran, and he should handle this situation fine regardless. But man, for me, I would just... Maybe I'm just selfish. Maybe I just want to see Rodgers on the field, and especially against this Hard Knocks Oakland Raiders team that apparently has some defensive players that think they are just the best in the league. So I would just love to see them pick them apart, quite frankly. Let's have a drink break, and we'll talk about some other notable things, apparently. So outside of Rodgers returning to practice, there were a couple other notable names that have returned to the practice field as well. You talk about Jamal Williams. He returned on Sunday, and Aaron Jones, who came back last week. So we have our two projected 1-2 punch as far as that running back game. Jones was listed or was stated, or LaFleur said that Jones will play a couple series on Thursday night, so that'll be the first peek that we'll get to see of Aaron Jones, hopefully out there with Rodgers in that first string offense. And then Williams will not participate, so he's just coming back from practice. I wouldn't be surprised if they did give him some snaps next week against the Chiefs, because you just don't want to go into that first regular season without any playing time. Boy, am I hitting something with Aaron Rodgers. Those are just my feelings. Comment down below if you agree or disagree with whether Rodgers should play or any of these starters should play. Maybe we should just sit everyone for the next 2 weeks and just go into Chicago healthy. Sternberger came back. He finally cleared concussion protocol. He will not play on Thursday. And Trevor Davis returned to the practice on Sunday as well. And he had a great practice Monday. He had a very solid OTAs. He had a very solid start to training camp. Trevor Davis, like I've mentioned, is one of those players that I am surprisingly a fan of, that I think can make the team, that should make the team. But if there's someone who's going to step right in his path, it is Shepard. He is his biggest threat, especially with the kick returning abilities that Shepard showed on Thursday night. Trevor Davis, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be really fun to see how this wide receiving battle kind of shakes out. So still out of practice or newly added, we have to start with Jimmy Graham. He ran off the practice field on Sunday holding his hand. It looked like a potential dislocated finger. It is listed as some sort of a finger injury. Reports are that Graham will not need surgery. So those reports just came out yesterday. So sigh of relief that we dodged a bullet. And LaFleur was stated saying that he will be all right, and Goody commented that we might have escaped one there. So thank the Packer Lord that Jimmy Graham did not break a finger or anything major like that. If you remember last season with the Packers, he hurt his finger too and continued to play, but you have to imagine that just affects his ability and his awesomeness to go out there and contribute on that offense. Outside of Graham, Kevin King still out. Goody did say that Kevin King is getting close, but and from the sounds of it, they haven't completely written him out of being ready for week 1, so that'll be interesting to see how that unfolds. Tony Brown, on the other hand, at cornerback, has capitalized on the fact that Kevin King has sat out. I think he's had an excellent training camp. I think he is someone that should make the roster, especially when we talk about depth at cornerback and that being a concern. We've had some solid players step up, and I'm excited to see kind of how that shakes out over the next couple weeks. Oren Burks obviously out. Curtis Bolton, who filled in for him, had a great game Thursday night, brought a lot of energy. Danny Vitale out. Kadar Holman out. Josh Jones out. And that rounds out the list. There's some other, some other names that are on that injury report, but these are the main ones that I look at. With Josh Jones being out, I expect him to be cut. I'm gonna say it right now. I'm giving you a preview of my video next Friday. unless something just miraculous happens in the next 2 weeks, which I don't see happening, quite frankly. Josh Jones should be cut, and he'll get his wish. He will not be on the Packers, and he'll probably end up on the Browns or the Vikings, because that's a pattern as of late. Hopefully he ends up with the Dolphins, where he can just suck the rest of the season away. One last thing about this past week of training camp before we move on. If there was an interview with Rodgers on Monday night, and in a blink or you'll miss it, a blink and you'll miss it moment, I think is what I wanted to say. During the very end of Rodgers' interview, one of the reporters, trying to stir up some shit like reporters like to do, he asked Rodgers, it's kind of a question. He goes, so Matt gave you a play, and this is during a 2-minute offense. So Matt gave you a play, then you, thinking about it, just decided to change the formation, and what was that about? And Rodgers immediately, kind of nipped that one in the bud, because they're just starting to, they want to start some drama between LaFleur and Rodgers. And Rodgers confirmed that he will be calling the offense during the 2-minute drill, or the 2-minute offense heading into the season. That was a surprise to me. So there's been all this talk and all this discussion whether or not Rodgers and LaFleur will get along, and I think the ultimate sign of respect to LaFleur is to acknowledge the fact that Aaron Rodgers has an entire highlight reel when it comes to 2-minute drives and getting the ball down the field and scoring and propelling the Packers to victories. I mean, some of the most frustrating moments that we had, and we look back to last year against the Rams, is when Montgomery ran out of the end zone with about 2 minutes left, fumbled the ball, and Rodgers didn't have a chance to march it down the field for that 2-minute drill and possibly beat the NFC champions that went on to the Super Bowl. So this is a great sign. This is just another sign, things that are not clickbait, as you will, that give you hope for that LaFleur and Rodgers relationship. Will there be, learning to go along with this? Absolutely. It's going to be something that they continue to fine tune over the season, over the years. But I love that LaFleur respects Rodgers' veteran mindset, and that he just knows that if he takes the reins and calls the plays during that 2-minute offense, that things will probably be just fine. He'll just ride the wave, and that's not a bad thing to do when you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. So what's next? We're wrapping up the video. What's next? What can we look forward to? So the Packers kick off their third preseason game tomorrow night. It is at 7 p.m. Central Time if you are one of those Wisconsin residents. Otherwise, if you live throughout the rest of the world, Google it. It will tell you when the game kickoff is for your time zone. 3 things that I will be watching heading into or during tomorrow night's game. That first string offense. So obviously this is my first 2 are just kind of a whole group effort. I don't want to pinpoint one player, because yes, there are players that obviously are vying for roster spots, but in this case, it's that third game. This could be the only shot that we have to see Aaron Rodgers on offense, and I want to see them put some points on the board. Rodgers might say that if they go out there and stink it up, that it's not going to disrupt his confidence. I'm going to call bullshit. I'm going to say if you don't go out there and score points, it's going to mess with your head a little bit, because you haven't done it yet, and this new scheme, this new offense with some of these players, with some of the people that you have on this roster. So they have to go out there, they have to score some points, and that's something that I think is crucial to the success of this team, and definitely crucial to having a fast start in the game against Chicago in 2 weeks. On the other side of the ball, we have to talk about the defensive intensity and, of course, the tackling. So this has to improve. We've seen that first game and went, okay, yep, it's that first game. These guys are getting used to tackling each other. That's fine. We'll give you a pass. Then you head into the second week where there should have been corrections, and there were just as many missed tackles as there was the previous week. So if we see 3 straight weeks of this tackling or lack of tackling occurring in Green Bay, that is going to be a huge problem for us to try and overcome against the Chicago Bears, because these starters, most of these guys that are playing in week 3 or starting in week 3, or where the missed tackles have been coming from in week 3, are going to be sitting out in that final game. And you just have to get out there. You have to get out there and hit people. You have to take them to the ground, and you have to come at it with intensity. I want to see a complete domination of the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night against the Oakland Raiders. It has to be. We can't afford to have another loss. And then, yes, the games don't matter in the grand scheme of things, but at least in that first half, if not the first quarter, the Packers need to look like the better team. They have to look like the better team, and that has to build that confidence, build that momentum, build that culture, and head out to Chicago. The last thing that I will watch is on that defensive side of the ball. And I will pinpoint a player, and that is Rashan Gary, who has had stellar practices and had a stellar offseason and stellar beginning of training camp, but he has not shown up in game day, and this was a knock against him at Michigan as well. Now, it's way too early. I'm not drawing correlations per se between his performance on the field in Michigan and what we've seen in 2 preseason games, because that would be absolutely stupid. Trust me, I realize it. I'm not going down that road. But we need to start to see, hopefully him, get into the backfield, make a couple tackles, show a little bit of fire, because there are other people who have jumped off of this roster that have been making plays, and he has no excuse, quite frankly, with his skill set and his athletic ability to be flying under the radar and not at least have 1 or 2 highlight plays coming out of Thursday night's game. So those are the 3 things that I'll be watching. I think next week we'll break it down into individual players, because those are the guys that are going to be right there on that bubble heading into roster cuts next Saturday. Deep breath, and I think I'm done. I think I've talked about what I want to talk about. Again, I apologize that this video came a little bit later. I mean, it feels like a long time. It's been a week since I posted a video. It feels like a really long time. I'm thinking I'll slowly start to get back on track to posting 2 videos a week. Kind of getting that groove and that momentum. The podcasts are coming, so the actual podcasts that you can download on YouTube and Spotify are in the works, so keep an eye out for that. And then a little bit of another thing that I'm just going to kind of bring up is that I want to, depending on if we can get enough viewers and subscribers, because I just don't want to be talking to myself, but about an hour or so after kickoff, I'm going to be going live on YouTube. I'm going to be asking you guys to chime in. We might do some Google Hangouts. We'll do some comments, ask some questions, discuss what we saw in the game. So that's something I'm looking very forward to. I'm going to be drunk. I'm Jello shots and beer. I'm not going to be myself, but I will do a more extensive breakdown following day or the following 2 days after the game, where we'll talk about some more of the statistics. But hey, let's see how it goes. I'll keep myself, conscious enough to have a discussion and talk about the Packers. I mean, I love listening to that post-Packer radio show, except there's a bunch of people who just obviously don't know what they're talking about. So that's why we're gonna do it through the For Another channel. So as always, again, thank you for checking out the video. Subscribe, hit that subscribe button, comment down below, and until next time, I'll see you on the internet. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.